Hi, I'm Konstantin Baum, Master of Wine, and today we're jumping into a pool of rot. Noble rot. The fungus that is known as Botrytis cinerea, Pourriture noble or Edelfäulnis can turn pretty grapes into rotten bunches, which then can be turned into liquid gold. I'm going to explain to you how that takes place, and we're going to taste 4 aged examples from 4 classic regions. And no, I didn't gain weight, it's the bottles. They're just smaller than normal, okay? Let's go. The most famous story about the history of noble rot wine is from the Rheingau region in Germany. A messenger was sent out to get permission in order to start the grape harvest. He either got robbed or drunk, depending on who you want to listen to, and when he came back, the grapes were already rotting on the vines. But when the grapes were harvested and turned into wine, the outcome stunned everyone. It was a delicious, golden, sweet wine. This might have never happened, but it is likely that the first Botrytis wines were accidents, as playing with the fungus is dangerous. Botrytis has 2 sides. It can cause grey rot, which usually affects shoots, young bunches, unripe or slightly damaged berries, and it can wipe out a significant share of that year's production. But when it attacks healthy and ripe grapes, it is called noble rot, and it is an important factor in the production of some of the best sweet wines in the world. Botrytis spores grow on grapes when the humidity is high and the temperatures are moderate, between 15 and 20 degrees Celsius, but there are some grape varieties that are very susceptible to it, like Riesling and Semillon, and some, like Cabernet and Solaris, that are pretty tolerant. Noble rot penetrates the skins of the berry, but it doesn't allow other diseases to spoil the juice. Over time, it mainly sucks out moisture, but it also feasts on some of the sugars and some of the acidity. Over time, the grapes turn from green to golden to purple. They shrivel and the sugars and acidity become concentrated and the flavor just changes. So it changes the grape's composition significantly, and the resulting wine tastes completely different to what it would have tasted like without the rot. But now let's taste these wines. This is clearly the most high-calorie tasting I've ever done, but it might also be one of the best lineups I've ever tasted on this channel. So I'm starting off with the 2009 Esterhazy Beerenauslese from the Burgenland in Austria, and this should be a pretty good starting point. Beerenauslese refers to a wine that is made from late harvested grapes that are either partially or fully infected by Botrytis. This wine is from the Neusiedler See, which is a lake that is pretty shallow, and the humidity that comes off the lake is essential in making this style of wine. The winery was established in 1758 and it produces some really good wines. The wine is a cuvée, but it doesn't really tell me what kind of grape varieties are in there. If I'd have to guess, I'd probably say there's some Welschriesling in there, some Chardonnay, some Traminer, but I don't really know. This is the only wine bottled under a screw cap, which is not necessarily very common with these sweet wines because they are supposed to be aged and they usually age under cork. But there's nothing wrong with using the good old screw cap. So you could already see through the bottle that the wine is golden in color. This is quite common for sweet wines. You can also see that it's really concentrated with high levels of viscosity, so it moves very slowly in the glass. The wine smells of raisins, figs, dried apricots. There are quite a lot of dried fruit flavors coming through. It's very precise, quite rich and opulent. Really beautiful. I mean, it is intense, but there's quite a lot going on there. So it's not just like one fist into your face. On the palate, the wine is quite rich and concentrated. It lacks a little bit of acidity, in my opinion. This is 12.5% alcohol. In Germany, Beerenauslesen tend to be below 10% of alcohol. So this is actually a bit more concentrated, a little bit more full on. Well, I'm missing a little bit of that balance, basically. But you clearly get those Botrytis flavors here. They are a bit difficult to explain, but there's a little bit of the dried fruit character, which is quite typical for Botrytis. There's also a little bit of dustiness, which reminds me very often of rye bread. And on the palate, there's some bitterness there. This is a pretty good example of a Botrytis wine. Like I said, this is a very good start. I'm going to rate this 90 points. I think it's very classic, very typical for the style of Beerenauslese that's being produced in the Burgenland region. Like I said, I'm missing a little bit more acidic punch here to make the wine a little bit more balanced and more interesting, but it is really good. So the next wine is the 2017 Carmes de Rieussec from Chateau de Rieussec in Sauternes, Bordeaux. This is actually a wine that was featured in one of my videos in the past, but I didn't taste it back then, so this is the opportunity, I guess. Chateau Rieussec is a premier cru classified estate owned by the Rothschild family, who also own Chateau Lafite. This is actually a direct neighbor to Yquem, the most famous estate in the region. They are only separated by a little creek that is called the Rieussec River, and that river actually dries up in summer. The French word for dry is sec, and that's how the name Rieussec came together. Sauternes is pretty famous for Botrytis wines because it offers the perfect conditions for spreading the fungus. Bordeaux is pretty wet anyways, and in Sauternes it is even more humid. The Ciron and the Garonne River play an important role here. They flow into each other and create fog on a regular basis in autumn, and that's how lots of Botrytis develops in all of the vineyards in that part of Bordeaux. So this is actually their second wine, the Carmes de Rieussec, which contains 94% of Semillon, 3% of Sauvignon Blanc, and 3% of Muscadel. And the wine is fermented and aged in barriques for 18 months. So this is pretty much a classic recipe. Well, the cuvée is maybe a little bit different, but the way it is made is pretty classic for the production of Sauternes. Sauternes is interesting because, well, it used to be a very popular, very expensive wine, but that has changed over the last few decades. Nowadays, the dry red wines are much more popular and therefore much more expensive than the sweet wines. But the sweet wines are really difficult to make, and, well, you get a very small yield per hectare or per vine, depending on how you want to count it. So actually making this is much more expensive than making half a bottle of Lafite, or Carruat de Lafite in this case. A piece of cork came off and fell into the wine, which is always a bit of a shame. So you should take that out. The wine is definitely not corked now. You know, there's just cork in the wine. It's not corky. It's not corked. Now it's clean. Sauternes is also interesting because, well, it usually has high levels of sugar. It also has pretty high levels of alcohol. So many Sauternes are around 14.5% of alcohol. So it tends to be quite a rich and round and concentrated wine. So as you can see here, it's actually golden also, but it is less golden than the previous wine. So, well, that is mainly due to the age, I believe. As white wine ages, it gets darker and more brown, and this is still fairly young, so this is kind of a typical color for a young Sauternes. It might be young, but it is really nice. I mean, the oak flavor still comes through quite a bit, but there's also this white peach apricot character that comes through, which is really pristine. Lots of very clean fruit flavors there. On the palate, it is rich and concentrated, but it also has good freshness in the end. So it's actually kind of lively, but a substantial wine for sure. This definitely needs the right food to go with it. I'm a big fan of Sauternes with the foie gras. Not everyone likes foie gras, but I do like my foie gras with a glass of this. Sorry. Another interesting thing here is that this is actually the cheapest wine in the tasting. It retails for between 35 and 40 US dollars. And this is not a wine that you should drink right now. It's actually something that you can put away for 10, 20 years. And at that price, this is actually a pretty good deal. I will rate this 92 points. I think it's a delicious wine. Dare I say it's a yummy wine. So yeah, really good. The next one is actually a wine style that is forbidden today. It's the 2000 Pendits Tokaj Aszu Essencia. This winery was purchased by the Baum family after the end of the Cold War in 1991. and they work organically, and also a little bit of biodynamics are employed at the estate. They have 10 hectares of vineyards, and well, they are in the region of Tokaj. Tokaj is clearly the most famous wine out of Hungary. It's also a wine based on Botrytis grapes. And again, here rivers play an important role in getting the humidity into the vineyards and making sure that Botrytis can spread readily in autumn. Tokaj Aszu is also made using Botrytis grapes, but the process is a little bit different. The Botrytis grapes are hand selected, and then they are macerated in some must or fermenting wine for 1 or 2 days before being pressed off. And then the wine is fermented in barrel and then aged in barrel for a long period. They are classified by the sweetness level, which depends highly on the level or the concentration of Botrytis grapes in the must. And well, the Tokaj Aszu Essencia used to be the highest level of Aszu wine, but now it has changed a little bit. 10 years ago, they changed the legislation, and now Essencia is actually a separate term, only reserved to wines made from purely Botrytis grapes. And these wines can be extremely sweet and very concentrated. And this today couldn't be called Aszu Essencia anymore. I don't know all that much about this wine, apart from the fact that it must have had more than 100 grams of residual sugar. So it should be pretty sweet, pretty concentrated, and pretty rich. I like Tokaj wines because they have lots of concentration and sweetness, but they also have lots of acidity. The grape variety, the main grape variety used in the region for mint, is actually bringing quite a serious level of acidity to the table, similar to Riesling basically, and the wines can be just outstanding, and they age for decades, centuries even. So you can see the color is really amber colored, so it's really dark, and this is due to the concentration of the wine, the high level of sweetness, but also on the age. This is now 23 years old, so there's even a little bit of brown notes coming through, so it already looks beautiful. On the nose, it smells of apricots, raisins. There's also like candied orange flavor coming through. There's a little bit of coffee, toffee notes that are there as well. On the palate, the wine is concentrated and rich, lots of concentration. I'm not really sure what the sweetness level is here, but I'm pretty sure that it's above 200 grams per liter. But the acidity makes it lively, fresh and vibrant, really fruity. Even though this wine clearly has more sweetness than the previous wine, it actually feels less sweet because of this acidity. That's also why it's really difficult in a blind tasting to determine the sugar level. Sweetness is always determined by sugar level and acidity. So a wine with high sugar and high acid will taste less sweet than a wine with the same amount of sugar and less acidity. So, well, it's complicated. You know what? I really like this wine, but I actually prefer less sweet wines. Oftentimes the sweetest wines are kind of looked at as the best, but I actually prefer sweet wines that are not super sweet, because I do like acidity, I like freshness. These wines tend to be a little bit too much sometimes. That said, I'm still going to rate this 94 points. I think it's really, really good. A beautiful wine with lots of balance and quite a lot of tension. And this is still young. You know what? A friend of mine once recommended tasting salty olives with sweet wine, because the saltiness of the olive will bring down the sweetness of the wine and will make the whole experience more exciting. So this is the moment to try it. This is nice. The wine actually tastes less sweet now, and the olive less salty. It's quite an experience. I think it's not the most harmonious pairing, but it's very interesting. So the last one of the tasting is the 2007 Müller-Catoir Haardter Rieslaner Trockenbeerenauslese. Isn't German the easiest language in the world? Trockenbeerenauslese is probably the most mispronounced word in wine. It refers to the highest level of predicate in German wine law. In order to make it, you have to harvest grapes that are affected by botrytis, and they have to have at least 150 degrees of Oechsle, which is roughly 400 grams per liter of residual sugar in the juice. Müller-Catoir was founded in 1744 in the Pfalz region. It's now run in the 9th generation. They have 25 hectares. And they mainly focus on white grape varieties. This variety, Rieslaner, is actually a crossing between Riesling and Silvaner. And the Rieslaner Trockenbeerenauslese from the 1990 vintage was actually the first wine that was ever rated 100 points by Robert Parker. So they claim. I actually couldn't find any references on robertparker.com to that wine and that vintage. But, well, I'm guessing that they know what they are talking about. So this wine actually has won lots of prizes and received pretty high scores over the years. So, well, let's open it. So this is now, 16 years old, almost. But that's actually not very old for Trockenbeerenauslese. They tend to be very age-worthy, so you can definitely keep them for a long time. This is also often the issue with sweet wines in my cellar, because I have quite a few of them, but I don't touch them because I don't feel like I have to drink them. I kind of feel like, well, this can wait. Just grab another bottle that might go bad in a few years. And but let's see, maybe it's not good anymore. That would be a surprise. The capsule actually has some weird stains here, so I don't really know what that is. I mean, it doesn't seem like there was a lot of leakage from the bottle. The cork seems fine, and the capsule's inside is also, well, it doesn't look terrible. There's a little bit of staining, but I think it's fine. So I don't know where this is from. Look at that. This is dark amber. It's almost like orange. It has some red in it, some brown. So this is clearly not just the age, but also the concentration of the wine, the high sweetness level, but also a little bit the age. It's interesting that some of those sweet wines actually turn a little bit green towards the rim. In Madeira, you see that quite often. And here you do also see that a little bit, like a little green tint towards the rim. On the nose, it smells of figs, of ripe apple, like an apple tart, like baked apple almost. It smells very complex, and there's also almost like a cinnamon dimension here. So it is quite interesting, very, very concentrated. On the palate, it gets really interesting because this has 6% of alcohol, so it's almost not really a wine. It has super high sweetness level, but the acidity is also extremely high. So this is a lot of fun. This is something I think very few places in the world can do, and this is quite exciting. So this is what I was talking about earlier. This combo of high acidity and high sweetness just makes your mouth water and your tongue dance tango. So it's really interesting. It's quite exciting. I mean, you don't want to drink a whole bottle, otherwise you get a sugar rush, but a glass is really, really fun. So as it sits in the glass, it actually opens up a little bit more. There's more chocolate and coffee notes coming through. So I think this will get more and more complex the longer it stays in bottle or in the glass for the next few days. So a really good wine, a great wine. I'm going to rate this 97 points. I think it's a beautiful bottle, a really exciting sweet wine. This was a really interesting tasting this range of wines, all made from Botrytis grapes, but very different in style and in expression. And I really enjoyed this. I really did enjoy tasting these 4 sweet wines. The best, clearly in my opinion, was this one, but those 2 were also really beautiful. This was also very good, maybe not at the same level as the other 3, but still a really beautiful sweet wine in its own right. So thank you for watching. If you like this video, then please like it down here. Subscribe to my channel if you haven't done so already. The question of the day is obviously, what do you think about sweet wines? Do you like them? Don't you like them? Which ones are your favorites? Let me know down below in the comments. I hope I see you guys again very soon. Until then, I'm probably going to have 1 or 2 sugar rushes, and you guys stay thirsty.